Welcome back to Route Double. Last time we caught up with reality at long last and learned the sad truth.
よかった。目を覚ましたのね。母さん。
His usually calm and collected mother was, for that moment, only smiling joyfully.
あれから丸2日も眠りっぱなしだったのよ。本当に心配したわ。でも、本当に無事でよかった。
But Natsuhiko asked his mother a question with a hollow voice.
母さん、ユーリは?
He couldn't see Yuri anywhere. The professor's smile froze at the question.
夏彦、落ち着いて聞いて。
She answered with a sunken expression on her face.
ユーリちゃんはゆうべ息を引き取ったわ。
Natsuhiko couldn't understand a word of what the professor was saying.
そんな、どうしてユーリが? ユーリちゃんは体が強くなかったのね。煙を吸いすぎてしまって意識が結局戻らなくて、それで昨日の夜。
None of the words entered his head. He couldn't perceive any meaning. Bit by bit, the truth slowly soaked into Natsuhiko's mind.
そんな。
The young Natsuhiko's cries echoed throughout the hospital that night. It was a memory Natsuhiko had sealed away in the deepest depths of his mind. His voice spilled out of his lips on his own. Yuri died back then. When the memory came back, he recalled each and every truth tied to it. How Yuri's funeral service went about quietly. How Natsuhiko was unable to attend. How Yuri's parents did not die in a traffic accident at all. Rather, they took advantage of their daughter's death to move out of the city. Oh. Then, Natsuhiko pondered. In that case, who's the Yuri standing right here? He timidly looked up. Tried to look at Yuri, who he knew was standing in front of him. But as she stood there, her body was faint and hazy.
Yuri.
He called her name. In response, Yuri just looked at him sadly and murmured,
私は一緒には行けないって言った意味、分かったでしょ?
That very moment, the facade Natsuhiko had believed to be the truth started crumbling down.
そんな。
His mind suddenly recalled words he had once heard.
幻覚も幻聴も脳が真実と信じてしまうことがある。その幻はその人にとって存在するものだから、怖がりも疑いもしない。
幻なのに。
幻なのに。
Hallucination. That word reverberated in its head. Impossible. There's no way that Yuri can be a hallucination. He's been with me these 9 years. I swear she was with me. Shock and confusion commanded Natsuhiko's thought process. But the more he thought about it, the more telltale signs he found. PTSD symptoms, repeated nightmares and flashbacks of past experiences, tendency to avoid things related to the cause of the trauma, finally panic disorders related to said trauma. Each of those symptoms applied to Natsuhiko. Hold on. Have I always had it backwards? The one who lost their emotional balance after the accident wasn't Yuri, it was you. A few days ago he had had this conversation with Yuri over the phone. How could you even tell? Because those were the words you were wishing for. At the time he had thought Yuri used empathy. She never needed to read his mind at all. She always knew, because she was a projection of his own mind. Because Yuri only existed in Natsuhiko's mind to begin with. That's why whenever Yuri talked to Salyu,
サリュちゃんはどう？漫画とかアニメとかフランスでも人気だって聞いたけど。
だってさ、どうだい、サリュ。
Salyu always asked for a repeat of what Yuri said. It wasn't simply because she didn't hear Yuri. It's because Yuri's voice could only be heard in Natsuhiko's mind. The reason Yuri couldn't leave the house was because Natsuhiko wished it so. Because it would be inconvenient to him if Yuri were to attract outside attention. The brain actively works to rationalize its perceptions to eliminate inconsistencies. Natsuhiko's perceptions were held up by countless rationalizations. The reason Yuri couldn't cook was because she didn't exist. The reason Natsuhiko felt no sexual desire for Yuri was because he couldn't touch her. And yet he kept believing Yuri was there all these 9 years. Because he was unable to accept her death. Does that mean Yuri is gone? Does that mean she's been dead for ages? The truth gradually sank into Natsuhiko's mind. What? I swear we just had a scene a few videos ago where Mashiro addressed Yuri directly. And there's been... His memories rewound. He recalled all the memories he shared with Yuri up until today. All the scenes she was in were replaced with the correct scenes. His memories of the past hour were replaced with the truth.
いや、僕も驚いたんだけど、ユリがこの施設の中にいたんだ。
This was twisted by Natsuhiko's perception. That's why people seem to interact with Yuri. Mashiro and Salyu looked around in shock. She was never here all this time. Yuri was nowhere to be seen. There was nothing but air where Natsuhiko thought Yuri was standing. And thus the illusion manufactured by Natsuhiko's mind disappeared from his memory. The fabrication he believed in collapsed, leaving only the truth from which Natsuhiko had always averted his eyes. The truth that Yuri was gone. It wasn't only the illusions in his memory. The illusion before his very eyes was also fading in favor of the truth. The fading illusion gazed at Natsuhiko and whispered,
ヒコリン、お別れの時が来たよ。
Wait, don't go. Tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. Couldn't even find the words.
ずっと騙しててごめんね。
Ah,
ヒコリンを支えてあげようと思っていたんだよ。だけど、もう私がいなくても大丈夫なはずだよ。
emotional support. Yuri wanted to pull him out of his... wanted to help him stand up again. To help him recover from his trauma. Hence all of this.
この数日の間に気づいたでしょ。ヒコリンは一人じゃないって。マシロンとサリュちゃんと3人ならどんなことでも乗り越えられたよね。博士だっていつもヒコリンのことを思ってくれている。
So she wanted to show us.
辛い真実を知ってもヒコリンを支えてくれる人はたくさんいる。私が最後に伝えたかったのはね、そのことなんだよ。
Perhaps that was why Natsuhiko recalled his memories again and again. To etch into his mind just how important Mashiro, Salyu, and everyone else were to him. So he'd be able to handle the truth. To correct the inconsistencies of his perception little by little. That's right. Whenever I tried to reject Mashiro and Salio, premonitions of disastrous futures would come to mind. The bad endings. Were those premonitions merely illusions made subconsciously by Natsuhiko's mind as a warning? His subconscious knew that if he were to continue rejecting Mashiro and Salio, he would be unable to stand up to the truth. But none of that mattered to him anymore. These were all theoretical bad endings instead of literal ones. Natsuhiko reached out to Yuri and raised his voice. This journey deep into Labo was to the place where Yuri passed out never to awaken. Literally breaking down the walls, holding Natsuhiko back from the truth.
行かないでくれユーリ。君と一緒にいた日々はかけがえのないものだったんだ。君が幻でも構わない。頼む、消えないでくれ。
Yuri sadly responded to his cries.
ダメだよヒコリン、それはできないの。ヒコリンは気づいてしまったんだから、私がいないっていうことに。でもそのおかげでね、9年間止まっていたヒコリンの時間がようやく動き出すんだよ。これからヒコリンは生き直すの。私の思い出に縛られない自分の人生を。だから
Goodbye. Yuri's voice stopped there. That was her final word. She had disappeared. The illusion vanished before Natsuhiko's eyes.
ああ。
Eventually, a strangled cry escaped from Natsuhiko's throat. It was the same scream he let out when he heard of Yuri's death. Bitter cry of one who had learned the truth. Just then, the door opened and someone rushed inside.
夏彦
It was Mashiro.
夏彦、叫んでたみたいだけど何かあったの？
Natsuhiko answered the worried Mashiro with a hollow voice.
ユーリが
ユーリがどうかしたの？
消えた。
消えたって一緒にいたんじゃないの？どこかにいなくなっちゃったの？
Hmm? Mashiro looked around the room. She was playing along. Just like she always had. Oh. Then Mashiro must be reading Mai. Once Natsuhiko realized that fact, he slumped powerlessly against the wall. He started giggling to himself. You okay, Natsuhiko? No, you're not. It was a frightening voice that sent shivers down his own spine.
ねえ、どうしたの？なんか様子が変だよ。ちょっと、ねえ。
Mashiro reached out and tried to touch Natsuhiko. Whoa! Natsuhiko pushed her hand away.
今さら何言ってんだよ。様子が変なのはずっと昔からだろ。
Mashiro's face stiffened at those words.
昔からって。夏彦、もしかして。
Whoa! Whoa! Dude! Natsuhiko grabbed Mashiro by the shoulders and pushed her against the wall.
夏彦、やめて。痛いよ。
Dude!
お前ずっと騙してたんだな。
騙してたって。
ユーリはいなかったんだな。9年前からずっと。気づいてなかったのは僕だけだ。 僕が現実を都合のいいように書き換えてたんだ。お前はおかしくなった僕に付き合ってただけなんだろう。こんな滑稽な話があるか。
そんな。
畜生、よくも僕を騙して。
Natsuko's chest tightened, his eyes blurred with tears. He stood face to face with Mashiro, whose eyes were likewise wet.
待って夏彦、私の話を。
うるさい。
Natsuko pressed his forehead into Mashiro's chest. He didn't want her to see him. He didn't want her to see him cry.
夏彦。
みんなで僕に嘘を。
Sally
お前
hasn't.
もサリュも母さんも。
Okay, maybe. That wasn't all that made him sad. Mashiro had always talked to Yuri like it was normal. How could she do that when Yuri only existed inside Natsuhiko's head? There's only one answer. Mashiro's been constantly reading my mind with empathy. Oh. He said she didn't read other people's minds without permission. That had always been a lie. Natsuhiko gripped Mashiro's shoulders even tighter. He didn't care that he was hurting her.
どうしてだよ。どうしてだよ。
He was mortified that he had been lied to. To make matters worse, he was lied to by the one he trusted the most. He would have rather lived with the truth, no matter how cruel, than keep living a lie. Mashiro. Natsuhiko soon felt darker emotions take hold of his heart. Mashiro was no longer the only one here who could use empathy. Oh no. You've always peeped into my mind. Oh no, so now it's my turn to peep into yours. Natsuhiko focused his mind. He didn't care if all he heard was a noise-ridden mental voice. As long as he could come to even the slightest bit of closer to understanding Mashiro's feelings. Mashiro, tell me, why have you been lying to me? I can't stand to look you in the eye if you don't. His intention was stronger than ever. Intention to expose the secrets in Mashiro's mind. The moment he embraced that intention in his heart, his five senses vanished. Natsuhiko's consciousness shot out into the endless darkness. Huh? Well, what is this? Felt like in a world shut off from everything. Sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, all of his senses paused. All that existed there was Natsuhiko's consciousness. Soon enough, he heard a faint voice in his ear.
夏彦、ごめんね。
Eh?
そうするしかなかったんだよ。私には嘘をつくくらいしか。
It was Mashiro's voice, or rather her thoughts. It was somehow different from empathy. Natsuhiko's consciousness remained in the darkness even after he heard Mashiro's voice. What's going on? It was like the cessation of sensation he experienced during empathy, except it continued on forever. That was the bizarre sensation he felt. What in the hell is this? Right when Natsuhiko thought that. What? A countless number of somethings flickered in the darkness. What? They were like pictures or films, fragmentary visions. Natsuhiko was in several of them. Out of all the visions drifting around Natsuhiko, he saw one of his own sorrowful face. Eh? That was me just a second ago. No way. Could this be what Mashiro just saw? Her memory. Once he made that realization, he remembered what the Phantom Yuri had said.
あれがコミュニケーターの行き着くところ。エンパシーの先にある能力。心と心をつなぐ力。だけど、それはもう使わない方がいいよ。なくてもいいことを
When he had tried to read the terrorists' minds last night at the ruined factory, he didn't hear just their voices, he saw their visions they had seen as well. No way, is that what this is? He didn't understand what she meant when he first heard her. Now he fully understood. This is the third ability of BC. The fact that the Yuri inside his mind said it meant that perhaps Natsuhiko was subconsciously aware of this ability's existence. She didn't understand the particulars. She was vaguely understood why it would be best that he did not use this ability. But even so, want to know. This ability can give me a deeper understanding of Mashiro than empathy can, then fragments of Mashiro's memory drifted about in the darkness. Vision so fragile, so brittle. Natsuhiko quietly peeked into the first such fragment. Whoa! Inside that memory was Natsuhiko himself in his childhood days. When is this memory from? Once he pondered that question, a date just popped into Natsuhiko's head. He naturally knew just when that event happened, as if he were recalling his own memories. July 7th, 2021. Wait, that date? This is Mashiro's memory of right before Yuri and I went to Labo. Inside that memory, Natsuhiko and Mashiro spoke.
ラボに行くんだよ。母さんを助けるためにさ。
Mashiro's eyes opened wide at those words.
やめなよ夏彦、危ないよ。あんなところ行っちゃダメだって。
なんで？
だってラボは危ない研究をしているって噂だし。
Well, the baby glasses thing, oh.
それに放射線ってのが出てるから入っちゃダメだってお父さん言ってたもん。
マシロビビってるのか？じゃあいいや、ユーリ誘おっかな。
何さそれ？近頃いつもユーリって。
Mashiro loved Yuri too, and the thought of her as a close friend despite their age difference. For some reason, Mashiro didn't like it whenever Natsuhiko said Yuri's name.
なんだよ、まさかやきもち？男女のくせに。
She could feel her cheeks turn red. As the blood rushed to her head.
夏彦なんかもう知らない。ユーリとどこにでも行っちゃえ。
Mashiro ended up yelling those words. Those words she would later come to regret for years and years. And after that, Natsuhiko and Yuri went to Labo. Mashiro had no idea what happened there. 3 days later, Mashiro came to the park by herself. Thought it was about time for her to make up with Natsuhiko. She was going to apologize when she saw him at school, but neither Natsuhiko nor Yuri had attended since that day before yesterday, so she never had a chance. That was just another one of our little fights, right? Things will be back to normal after we play for a day, won't they? When she and Natsuhiko played alone, neither had ever yielded, but whenever Yuri was with them, things would be okay. If Yuri were there to bind them together, they'd definitely be able to make up soon. With that plan in mind, Mashiro waited. But Natsuhiko just wasn't coming, it seemed. Even though he almost always showed up around this time.
夏彦んち行ってみようかな。
Eventually, Mashiro muttered that and walked off. Once she reached Natsuhiko's house, she tried pressing the doorbell. Nobody came. There was no response, no matter how many times she pushed the button.
変だな。誰かいないんですか？
But when she spoke up, she heard a voice from behind her.
ましろちゃん？
She turned around in shock to see Natsuhiko's mother, Dr. Miyoko Tenkawa, standing there.
あ、博士。
When Mashiro called her by that name, the professor spoke to her, in a tired voice.
どうしたの？
夏彦くんに会いに来たんですけど、いないみたいなんです。どこに行っちゃったんですか？
あなたまだ知らないのね。
何がですか？
夏彦は今病院にいるわ。
病院？
ラボで火災があって、ゆうりちゃんと一緒に巻き込まれて。
まさか入院したんですか？ゆうりと一緒って、じゃあゆうりも病院に？
ゆうりちゃんはもういないわ。
Dark expression on her face, the professor stepped up to Mashiro and held her by the shoulders as she spoke slowly.
ましろちゃん、ゆうりちゃんはね、救助された後、意識が戻らなくて、それでゆうべ。
When she heard those words, Mashiro felt her peaceful days come crashing to an end. Mashiro cried a whole day after that. By the time she attended Yuri's funeral, she had run out of tears. 1 week after that, tears would spill out every time she remembered what happened. Mashiro sobbed as she waited for the bus to go to the hospital. No matter how much she cried, she could not recover from the sadness of losing a dear friend. Yuri had an ever-gentle smile on her face. Yuri had told her she was cute, even when nobody else would treat her like a girl. Yuri had praised her cooking whenever they played house. Yuri was the gentlest, cutest girl that Mashiro wanted to be. And Mashiro could still not believe that she was gone. But even as sadness filled Mashiro's heart, just one other thing remained. Worry for Natsuhiko. Wonder if Natsuhiko's okay. Natsuhiko didn't attend Yuri's funeral. He was apparently still in the hospital. He hadn't come into school at all. I gotta go pay him a visit. Mashiro wiped her tears as the bus arrived. She got off the bus in front of the hospital. Mashiro went through reception and headed to Natsuhiko's room. Inside the hospital room, Natsuhiko was lying on the bed. Beside him was Dr. Tenkawa.
ましろちゃん、お見舞いに来てくれたのね。わざわざありがとう。
はい。夏彦くんはお休み中ですか？
夏彦はね。
Professor glanced at Natsuhiko. Mashiro peeked at Natsuhiko's face and gasped. Oh. He wasn't sleeping. He was lying down with his eyes wide open. Oh. There was no light in those eyes. He just stared blankly at the air.
Natsuhiko.
No answer.
Natsuhiko.
No answer.
ねえ、どうしちゃったの、Natsuhiko?
Wow, so those perfectly ordinary first few days before everything kicked off. For all those days, Natsuhiko was doing way worse than he ever gave off. Wow. I don't even have the right words for it, but
私の声聞こえないの？ねえ。
all this time, those days that felt ordinary and safe, and all the times I said, hey, this is okay. In reality, wow. Mashiro shouted in confusion. Dr. Tenkawa answered in her son's stead.
聞こえてないわ。ゆうりちゃんの死を知ってからずっとこうなの。ましろちゃんだけじゃない。私の声も医師の声も誰も事実を認められず心を閉ざしてしまったんだわ。
Mashiro looked at Natsuhiko in blank amazement. His gaze pointed off somewhere far into the distance. Mashiro left the hospital in disbelief. As she headed home, her head swirled with various thoughts and feelings. The strongest feeling of them all was regret. Yuri went to Leibo in my stead and died because of it. That's why Natsuhiko's like that. Mashiro's heart was torn apart by the regret of what she could never undo. She couldn't think of a way to dispel that regret. At least until Natsuhiko returns to normal Ao. She resolved to put everything she had into watching over Natsuhiko. She didn't care if she was merely serving as a replacement for Yuri or anything else. Mashiro swore to herself that she would watch over him. Mashiro frequently visited Natsuhiko after that. She prayed for the day that he'd regain consciousness.
夏彦、今日は調子どう？私は今日ね、BC の授業でね、初めてテレパシー成功したよ。これでついに私も能力レベル1。夏彦より先にテレパシー使えるようになっちゃった。すごいでしょ。へへ。
Oh. No matter how much Mashiro spoke, Natsuhiko would never respond. Even so, she would come speak with him as she believed that this was the only way to bring him back to reality.
いやー、夏彦、今年の夏休みは暇だよ。去年は肝試しとかシリウス脱出計画とか七不思議解明作戦とかいろいろあったのに、夏彦いないと何も起こんないもんだね。なんかつまんないな。
Even as time passed and summer break arrived, nothing changed.
今日はね、ちょっとびっくりすることが起きたの。隣のクラスの男子がね、私のことを好きだって手紙くれて。ねえ夏彦、私どうしたらいいのかな。
The world around Mashiro was changing. Time remained still for Natsuhiko.
あの手紙のことね、結局断ったよ。だってなんかそういうの私にはよくわかんなくてさ、好きとかそんなのって。
Mashiro strained to prevent her world from changing so that she wouldn't slip too far from Natsuhiko's time. In the blink of an eye, 3 months passed. That day, Mashiro visited Natsuhiko's hospital room.
今日は学校でさ、男子たちに夏彦はまだ退院しないのって聞かれたよ。博士がお見舞いを許してくれるの私だけだもんね。3ヶ月も会えないとみんな本気で心配みたい。夏彦ってやっぱり人気者だね。
Still no response.
夏彦の退院をみんな待ってるんだよ。
No matter how much she talked to him, there was no response. Eventually,
なんか答えてよ、夏彦。
her voice rung out from the bottom of her heart, echoed throughout the hospital room.
私も待ってるよ。夏彦が戻ってくるの。ユリがいなくなっちゃったから、一人でずっと。
Mashiro suddenly realized just how much her own voice was trembling. Vision had blurred before she noticed.
夏彦。
Mashiro touched Natsuhiko's cheek. It was right there, yet they couldn't exchange words. She could only guess what he was thinking. Mashiro whispered by herself in the tiny room.
寂しいよ、夏
んないことで喧嘩したりしたいよ。
Mashiro was already past the point where she had any hope for an answer. Sobs echoed through the quiet hospital room. Then, she heard the voice she had been waiting to hear. Mashiro gasped and looked at Natsuhiko in disbelief. Natsuhiko looked around, confused. The light had returned to his eyes. Eventually, those eyes fell on Mashiro.
真っ白
He called out her name.
夏彦
Natsuhiko twitched at the sudden shout.
何っていうかここは
Natsuhiko appeared unaware that he was in a hospital. Mashiro grasped Natsuhiko's hand and answered.
病院だよ。覚えてない？
ああそうか僕ユーリと一緒にラボで火事にあって
He appeared to be gradually recalling the circumstances. Mashiro softly spoke to him, holding back all the words she wanted to say so they wouldn't overflow.
夏彦、あれからずっと入院してたんだよ。私、何回もお見舞いに来てたんだから。
そうかありがとう
いいんだよ、そんなの。夏彦が戻ってきてくれただけで。
ごめん心配させちゃったんだな
Natsuhiko spoke apologetically. Mashiro wiped her tears and smiled.
いいっていいって。そんなことより博士に連絡しなきゃ。夏彦が目を覚ましたってさ。
そうだなそれに
Natsuhiko smiled as he spoke.
ユーリも心配してるだろうからな
The air froze in the hospital room.
ユーリだよ家で待ってるはずだからさ
夏彦
An ominous premonition arose from the pit of Mashiro's stomach. She asked him again in a rough voice.
どうしてそんなことを。
いや思い出したんだよ病院に運ばれた時のこと僕は煙をいっぱい吸って死んじゃいそうだったけどユーリは無事だったはずだろだから入院もしなくて済むって母さんが言ってたもん
That was an impossible memory. Natsuhiko had shut his mind after he learned about Yuri's death. But Natsuhiko appeared to believe what he had just said from the bottom of his heart.
夏彦まさか忘れたの？
ん何を
ユーリはね、もう死んじゃったんだよ。
Oh. Natsuhiko looked at Mashiro with blank eyes.
死んじゃったって何
だから火事でユーリは煙を吸って死んじゃったの。
As Mashiro repeated herself, Natsuhiko suddenly grimaced.
夏彦どうしたの？
なんか急に頭が痛いよ
夏彦大丈夫？夏彦
Natsuhiko groaned for a while. Eventually his face slackened as if he were at peace.
痛くなくなってきた
さあよかった。
何だったんだろう今の
Natsuhiko tilted his head. Mashiro had no answer. She had the feeling that Natsuhiko's headache was no ordinary headache. Mashiro's body trembled from an unknown fear.
まあいいや。それより母さんたちに連絡しなくちゃな。僕が目を覚ましたことを教えなきゃだろ。それにユーリも心配してるだろうしさ。
When she heard those words, Mashiro finally understood. Natsuhiko still had not returned to reality. He had become emotionally unstable. Mashiro called out his name. Called out the name of her friend who looked the same on the outside but was completely different. The tears she had wiped away had come back. Natsuhiko looked at her quizzically.
マシロ、どうして泣いてるの？
Those were Mashiro's memories from 9 years ago. As he peered into them, Natsuhiko's mind shook with surprise. What is this? That really happened? Without me even being aware of it? Natsuhiko himself had memories of how he was hospitalized after the fire. But what Natsuhiko remembered was completely different. She was saying I was completely comatose for 3 whole months. Then what happened after that? How did Mashiro handle me? As soon as he had the desire to know the answer to that question, another vision rose before his eyes. Next thing Natsuhiko saw was far further into the future than what he saw last. Memory of the recent past. Natsuhiko naturally knew just how much time had passed. Ah, it's 9 years after that day, huh? Indeed, it was a memory of just about a week ago. Mashiro was making breakfast in the Tenkawa kitchen as usual. Soon enough, she heard the living room door open as Natsuhiko greeted her.
Ohayo.
Mashiro returned to the greeting and quickly continued cooking. The newscaster on TV was rambling on and on in a matter-of-fact tone of voice.
次のニュースです。今朝未明、6名士の BC トレーニングセンターに過激派団体による怪文書が届きました。先頃行われた BC セミナーとの関連も指摘されており、警察は市の保安課と共同で。
Soon, she heard Natsuhiko's voice mix in with the voice on the TV.
Ohayo, Yuri.
Mashiro turned around.
Ohayo, Yuri.
But of course, no one was there. Natsuhiko acknowledged that Yuri had entered the room. Mashiro merely played along.
ちょうどご飯ができたとこだよ。
Mashiro distributed the food to Natsuhiko and Yuri without any panic in particular. Over the course of the past half year, Mashiro had completely gotten the hang of things.
今日のメニューは？
ハッシュドポテトにベーコンエッグ、サラダにオムレツにオレンジジュース。いわゆるアメリカンブレックファーストだよ。
おお、朝から充実してるな。
During that exchange, Natsuhiko was probably hearing Yuri's voice. Even at this point in time, he had still not accepted her death. He didn't just hear her voice. He always seemed to see an illusion of Yuri. Charles Bonnet syndrome, huh? Mashiro remembered the name of a condition she had read about in a book before. Charles Bonnet syndrome. A general term for a phenomenon that occurs due to an abnormality of information transfer in the brain. Even if the person is mentally normal, they suffer symptoms including visual hallucinations. Often the cause is physical trauma to the brain. When Natsuhiko got caught in the fire, he likely inhaled large volumes of carbon monoxide. I guess that damaged his brain and caused him to hallucinate. That was what Mashiro figured. But aside from that one detail, Natsuhiko was completely normal. As long as he didn't come into contact with the truth of that past, he would live calm, peaceful days.
さあ、それじゃ皆さん、手を合わせて。
いただきます。
And thus another morning began. Mashiro secretly used empathy on Natsuhiko, upon which she heard Yuri's voice as Natsuhiko heard it in his brain.
おいしい。さすがマシロンだよ。
ああ、よくあんな短時間でこれほどのものを作れるもんだ。
Oddly enough, using empathy on Natsuhiko allowed Mashiro to hear Yuri's voice as Natsuhiko heard it. Mashiro smiled at Natsuhiko.
慣れだよ、慣れ。もう半年も作ってるんだもん。
No wonder she's an empathy expert. Yeah, I am used to it. I've been doing this for years. It took 5 years to train herself to that level of ability. At this point in time, Mashiro had gained the equivalent of ability level 5. She was able to use empathy smoothly and naturally without the need to concentrate too hard, nor the need to sacrifice her hearing. There were likely very few communicators with the same level of ability as her in the entire nation. The reason Mashiro was able to obtain such power despite only having rank B aptitude was perhaps out of sheer force of will. Her will to know Natsuhiko's mind. That was what granted her ability beyond her aptitude. Empathy allowed her a glimpse of Natsuhiko's world whenever she wished.
あれ？ひこり、ご飯が進んでないね。お腹でも痛いの？
ああ、いや、大丈夫。じっくり味わって食べていただけさ。
そう？よかった。
僕はこう見えて体は頑丈なんだ。食欲はいつも旺盛だよ。
With that answer, Natsuhiko stuffed his cheeks with bread.
いい食べっぷりだね、夏彦。こっちも腕の振るいがいがあるよ。
Conversation concluded without any issue. Yuri certainly still existed, at least within the walls of the house. Even if her existence was a fragile illusion built upon the foundation of countless lies. Naturally, Mashiro was unbearably reluctant to peek into Natsuhiko's mind without permission. She chose to play along with Natsuhiko's story, even if it meant she had to overcome her guilty conscience. That was the only way she could remain by his side. 9 years ago, she took an oath upon herself to watch over Natsuhiko until he returned to his old self. Mashiro stayed true to that oath even now. Hallucinations weren't Natsuhiko's only issues. The more serious matter at hand was his panic disorder. One wrong move and Natsuhiko would come close to noticing Yuri's death, causing him to display symptoms including intense headaches and heart palpitations. In extreme cases, his memories would go into disarray and he'd begin to ignore reality. Aside from hospital staff, only Mashiro and Dr. Tenkawa knew about his condition. If only he could gradually improve. The most effective treatment for this kind of condition was said to be family therapy. That is, for the family to treat the patient with devoted support for their condition. I have to play the role of the family in the professor's place. That was what Dr. Tenkawa had requested due to her frequent absence from home. Natsuhiko spoke apologetically to Mashiro despite having been left in the dark.
それにしても、いつも悪いな、マシロ。
何言ってんの？夏彦のお母さんからお礼もいただいてるし、バイトみたいなもんだよ。それに、あんたのためじゃない。どっちかって言えば、有利のためだよ。ね。
As Mashiro said that, she secretly thought to herself, "Do it for Yuri, huh?" Mashiro did indeed suffer a deep wound after losing her close best friend. She was honestly happy that she could still talk to the deceased Yuri by using empathy on Natsuhiko. But naturally, that couldn't have been her only reason. What have all these 9 years been for? Not even Mashiro quite knew herself. Couldn't be explained simply by the words atonement or regret. No, I just want Natsuhiko to return to how he used to be. That's all. Because that's just about all I can do. As Mashiro silently recited her convictions, she looked at Natsuhiko, at the boy who gazed at the phantom of a dead girl without ever second-guessing it himself. Naturally, it was not as if she had any complaints about the current Natsuhiko. He had become so quiet that he seemed to be a completely different person. Mashiro believed that the old Natsuhiko was still there at his core. Ugh. But even so, once they came to a certain place where they shared memories long past, she couldn't help but feel her heart tear in two.
マシロって、なんだ、いいやつだな。
That's what Natsuhiko had said as they returned from their field trip. His embarrassed expression was the same as how he was as a boy. Something suddenly tightened in Mashiro's chest, forcing her to look away.
何言ってんの？昔の夏彦がやってたことを真似してるだけだよ。
そうなのか？昔の僕はいいやつだったってこと？
まあ今も十分いいやつだけどね、夏彦は。意固地なのがたまに傷なんだよね。
そうかもな。
Natsuhiko scratched his head in contemplation.
仕方ないな。真っ白に免じて少しは警戒を緩めてみよう。
うん、そのくらいでいいよ。今はそれが精一杯ってね。
なんだそれ、またアニメの引用か？
そう、私たちが生まれるずっと前のね。
When Mashiro smiled, Natsuhiko smiled back. She looked at his smile, Mashiro secretly thought to herself. Yeah, this will have to do for now. Mashiro could do nothing for him but watch over him and support him. She didn't do it to boast, nor did she want Natsuhiko to know what she was doing, or how she felt. As such, perhaps she really was doing it for Natsuhiko's sake. Her inconsistencies were endless. Nevertheless, Mashiro thought that she would stay by his side like this forever. This is for the best. I don't at least believe that I'm doing the right thing, then everything I'm doing for Natsuhiko will really be all for nothing. Let's leave it at that for now. Those days would eventually come to an end. Their daily life would one day collapse. There was indeed peace within his life. Like their nostalgic chat in the park illuminated by the glow of the setting sun. Even if that peace were only temporary, it was an irreplaceable treasure to her.
ねえ、夏彦。
ん？
今日はなんかいろいろ話せてよかったよ。また時間ある時にでもさ、ここに遊びに来ようね。
そうだな。たまにはな。
I'm not frustrated yet, but this is the third time we're reflecting on our memories of this past week. The third time. As Natsuhiko muttered that, a gentle breeze enveloped them. Mashiro gazed at his face from the side and silently prayed, knowing this moment of peace could last forever. Okay, I think we're done. Then the visions within the memories faded. Natsuhiko returned to reality as if he had woken up from a dream. Before his eyes was a crying Mashiro pushed against the wall. Apparently only a fleeting moment had passed in reality. Natsuhiko had experienced 9 years of her life. He shed endless tears.
夏彦。
Mashiro called out in confusion. Once he heard that voice, Natsuhiko silently brought her into a deep embrace. Oh? Is your memory collector? You could feel her body tensing up. She took a brief moment to browse the achievement that just popped up, and that's 50% of all event CGs. To give you an idea of how long this game appears to be, we haven't even reached 50% of all scenes. But Natsuhiko embraced her even stronger as he spoke.
マシロ、ごめん。ごめんな。お前、ずっと僕を支えてくれてたんだな。僕のためにずっと一緒にいてくれてたんだな。
Mashiro gasped at those words.
どうしてそのこと。
勝手にやって申し訳なかったけど、BC でお前の記憶を読んだんだ。
記憶ってそんなことが。
できたんだよ。おそらく BC の新しい能力だと思うんだけど、ただお前の気持ちが知りたくて心底そう願ったら 9年前から今日までのお前の記憶が僕にも見えたんだ。それで全部知った。僕がユーリを失った時、心が壊れてしまったことも、そしてお前がずっと見守ってくれてたことも。
そんなことまで。
なあ、だから。
Natsuhiko paused there. He desperately held back his overwhelming emotions and squeezed out the words.
ありがとう。ありがとう、マシロ。
Tears came spilling out again. Natsuhiko recalled the words Yuri's phantom whispered to him 6 days ago.
だから周りの人を疑わないで。疑うなら私だけでいい。
Ah,
何が本当で何が嘘でも、ヒコリンは善意に囲まれているはずだよ。
what Yuri said was true. Natsuhiko had always been protected by the people around him. For 9 whole years. And then Mashiro.
いいんだよ。
Mashiro had that to say to him.
私ね、ずっと心配だったんだ。
心配？
夏彦がこのことに気づいたら、また夏彦が9年前と同じになっちゃうんじゃないかって。でも夏彦はそうはならなかった。ちゃんと悲しみを受け止めてくれた。それだけで私嬉しいんだよ。ねえ夏彦、よく耐えたね。頑張ったね。
Natsuhiko shook his head at those words.
マシロ、僕が耐えられたのはお前のおかげなんだ。お前がずっとそばにいてくれたから。
そばにいたのは有利だよ。
違う、お前のおかげで僕は。
He had no more words. He just embraced Mashiro tightly once more. An embrace filled with 9 years of feelings.
夏彦、私夏彦のそばにいられてよかったよ。
Mashiro returned the embrace. They remained in each other's arms for a while. Without words, without BC. How much time had they spent in each other's arms before after that? Eventually Natsuhiko let go of Mashiro and spoke up.
行こうか、マシロ。お前をここから脱出させるのが僕の役目だ。
でもカードは？
この塔にあるはずだ。なんとなくだけどわかるんだよ。
Yuri's phantom said that Natsuhiko had merely overlooked it. He decided to trust in her words. Remember, I must have seen it. Where have I been where I have already seen a card? As soon as he pondered that question, the card's location flickered in his mind as if in a flashback.
隣の階段室だ。探そう、マシロ。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro rushed out of the room and dashed to the stairwell. It was dark because the light had been broken. Natsuhiko and Mashiro stared hard as they searched for the card together. Eventually, hidden in the pile of rubble, Natsuhiko spotted a rectangular object.
あったぞ。
Mashiro looked at the card Natsuhiko had picked up. Written on it was the name Miyoko Tenkawa and the letters level N.
母さんのカード。どうしてここに？
避難するときに落としていったのかな？
They couldn't know the details. However, Natsuhiko felt it was as if Yuri had left them with this card.
とにかくこれならきっとあのセキュリティゲートも開けられるぞ。
だね、早速試してみよう。
ああ。
They dashed out of the stairwell. They arrived at the gate that had been blocking their way. Natsuhiko swiped the newly found card through the gate's card slot.
頼む。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro were huddled up and prayed. And as if their prayer had reached heaven, the gate slowly opened before them. Mashiro looked at Natsuhiko with gleaming eyes.
よし、この先の第6エリアにきっと脱出口がある。
わかるの？
9年前もさ、第6エリアから脱出したんだよ。
A complicated smile formed across Mashiro's face as she heard those words. Natsuhiko himself felt sad as he looked back at the way they came. Back at Area 5, where he and Yuri had been trapped that fateful day. In the same place where Yuri's illusion had vanished. There was nothing there now. Yuri was no longer with them. Natsuhiko finally accepted that truth. Goodbye, Yuri, and bid her farewell. She no longer existed anywhere but in their memories. Natsuhiko recalled one such nostalgic memory. Memory of when she was living. The ruined factory, after the professor had said that she would do something about Yuri's situation. They first headed home. Natsuhiko and Yuri walked silently, hand in hand. The professor walked a few steps ahead of the two as she spoke on the phone with someone.
ええ、ネグレクトの可能性が。BC 法14条は適用できませんか？では、せめて親権者への是正勧告を保安課の方から。
Natsuhiko's mother spoke in a firm voice. What she was talking about was too difficult for the kids to understand. However, they at least had a vague idea. The situation was serious. Eventually, Yuri cast down her eyes and murmured,
ねえ、Natsuhikoくん。
ん？
今日はありがとう。すごく楽しかった。
Natsuhiko's chest tightened as she thanked him. He said he'd protect Yuri, but he couldn't fulfill his promise. He even borrowed strength from his mother. He had no idea how far that would get him. Perhaps dragging Yuri along this late at night only made things worse. He had seen how horribly furious her parents would get at her after she'd returned home.
ごめんね、ユーリ。僕、何もできなかった。ユーリのために何もできなかったよ。
Yuri shook her head at those words.
そんなこと言わないで。本当にちょっとだけの家出だったけど、私、本当に楽しかったんだよ。お手手つないで歩いて、いっぱいお話できて、大切な思い出ができたの。それだけで、私は。
Yuri sealed her lips at that. Natsuhiko looked up to the sky to prevent his tears from falling down. Stars shine throughout the night sky. Yuri looked up at the stars too.
星、綺麗だね。
うん。
And thus they ended up looking at the sky together. Yuri pointed to some particularly bright stars and spoke.
ねえ、夏彦くん、あの星知ってる？
あの星って？
天の川の横にある2つの星。織姫と彦星って言うんだよ。
うん。聞いたことある。
彦星は夏彦くんの星だね。名前が似てるもん。
Yuri smiled slightly as she spoke. Natsuhiko gathered the courage to answer her.
そうだな。じゃあ、織姫なんて名前じゃなくて、有利星って名前だったらよかったのにね。
残念だけど私、お姫様じゃないもんね。
ああ、でもそれじゃダメか。あの2つの星、離れ離れだし。
だけど、2つの星はね、離れていても1年に一度会えるんだよ。その約束があるから寂しくないんだよ。私も寂しくないよ。公園に行けばいつでも夏彦くんに会えるもん。 織姫と彦星よりずっと会いやすいもん。
He knew that those words were her earnest attempt to sound like everything was okay. He was quietly assaulted by regret and helplessness. It wasn't as if seeing her in the park again and again could save Yuri. Age, family, social standing, those completely worthless things had separated them. It's like how the heavenly river of the Milky Way separated the two stars. But Natsuhiko firmly grasped Yuri's hand.
ねえ、ユーリ。僕、今日のこと忘れないよ。ユーリと一緒に星を見たこと、きっと忘れない。
Natsuhiko swore to never forget his regrets. He swore an oath upon his heart. Yuri smiled back at him.
私も忘れないよ。今日のこと。すっごく嬉しかったよ。夏彦くんが私を守るって言ってくれて。
Yuri gazed at Natsuhiko. As Natsuhiko gazed back, he silently swore to one day go up to her, protect her forever. As I grow up and get stronger, I swear I'll protect you, Yuri. Oh, smile. She smiled at him as he swore that oath.
ありがとう、夏彦くん。私、待ってるから。
Those words softly echoed in Natsuhiko's mind. In the end, Natsuhiko couldn't fulfill his promise back then. He was the one who was always being protected. On that note, Charles Bonnet syndrome, or Rene. A condition that causes patients to see hallucinations despite otherwise mental normalcy. First described by Swiss naturalist Charles Bonnet. Often found in old patients with visual impairment due to diabetic retinopathy or cataracts, as well as young patients with brain trauma. Even if the patient is mentally normal and is aware that they are seeing a hallucination, the hallucination is still vivid and can only be judged to be a hallucination using circumstantial evidence. Even if they are aware that it is their own brain showing them the hallucination, they cannot seem to control the hallucinations at will. Worldwide sightings of gods, angels, as well as aliens and ghosts could possibly be the result of Charles Bonnet syndrome. This is one of those things that we kind of had a feeling, but didn't know if the game was going to go all the way that route. And wow, all along, the Yuri we knew was just an illusion. They even explain away Mashiro with Mashiro being the closest to Natsuhiko. She knew about it, and she played along to not push Natsuhiko towards that painful edge. We're finally in reality now. I'd say we're finally back. We gotta be approaching the end now. So until next time, until then.